Myself, my name is Christian Macy. I'm one of the... Thank you. I'm one behind the Riverside and bringing back this historic building from the grave, so to speak. As you all know, it's been empty for about 7 years. And it's never been something quite as diverse as what we're trying to do, which is to create a space that really empowers people to follow their passions and find their passions in the first place by addressing all their needs. So we're doing that by having 3 different businesses. A restaurant called Bite that also has a wine bar, which you don't get a lot in Boulder. Agora, which is our event center, which you are in right now. I should mention, by the way, all of the flooring that you see below you came from Washington School on Broadway and Cedar, and it was pulled up by about 50 volunteers, all from either the Boulder Jalapa Friendship City program or from students who used to go to the Washington School themselves. So we got a lot of tremendous community support, and we're really proud of that. The last piece is Fuse, which is a co-working space. Right upstairs. It'll also be downstairs. If you'd like, you can, after the talk, feel free to walk upstairs. And we have information on all those available. If you'd like to sign up for our newsletter and get more information on what's going on in the space, or just sign up to get a tour of it, feel free. There's a laptop in the back, and you can sign up for our newsletter. We've got a lot of really great talks and events coming up. The Riverside Talks specifically is a series of talks that we're focusing on really trying to empower and inspire people by picking the brains of some of the people who are well recognized in our communities as being forward-thinking and really open to different ways that you can pursue your passions in life. So without further ado, one of those people is Brad Feld. A recent book that he co-wrote with his wife is The Startup Life, and it's focusing on essentially how do you start up a business without sacrificing your relationships, and how do you keep everything strong. And I know my lovely wife Luann, sitting right there in the matching with the sticker, actually, magenta shirt, has put up with a lot over the last year. So we're looking forward to the talk, and also to buying a copy of the book, which you can get at the back. So without further ado, Brad Feld.
Thanks, Christian, and thanks everyone for coming. I'm going to talk for 15 or so minutes, and then do Q&A for however long y'all want to do Q&A about any topic. We can talk about startup life, we can talk about startup communities, which is the first book in the Startup Revolution series. We can talk about venture capital, financing companies, Boulder, how awesome it is that this building doesn't smell like Estrelitas anymore, and kind of go anywhere you want. This is the first time I'm talking publicly about startup life, or this particular book. The book's official publication date is today, even though it's been out for about 2 weeks. So it's really fun to be talking to y'all about this, and sort of each book that I've done, there's like that memory I have of the first time I talked about it. By the time I've talked about it 50 or 60 times, I sort of have a nice, 15, 20 minute riff that I do. I have none. So you're getting, sort of the whatever's on my mind tonight, and wherever I happen to go is what you get. Let me give you a very brief background for those of you that don't know me. I'm a partner in a venture firm around the corner called Foundry Group. We're diagonal from the Rio in 1050 Walnut. It's 4 partners. We're investing our 3rd fund. Each of our funds are $225 million. We invest in early stage software internet companies all around the US. A bunch of the companies locally that you may know of include companies like SendGrid, and Trada, and LinkSmart, and GNIP, Rally Software, ReturnPath, and then plenty of others. We've recently invested in 2 companies that came out of Techstars last year, PivotDesk and MobiPlug. In addition to that, I co-founded Techstars, and my partners at Foundry and I are all very involved in Techstars, which is the accelerator that started here that now has programs in Boston, New York, Seattle, San Antonio, has a white label partnership with Microsoft for the Microsoft Accelerator, which we run for them. and that's focused on Microsoft technologies. Azure and Connect are the first 2 programs. We also recently launched the Nike Accelerator, which is in conjunction with Nike up in Portland, all around quantified self and Nike's technology products around that, Nike Plus, Fuel Band, etc. And we have some more announcements coming in the imminent future about things that are happening. So it's been pretty exciting. There's been about 200 companies that have gone through Techstars to date through the various programs. We have 100 new companies or so a year going through it. And that's something that's been incredibly rewarding for me. I've also been writing. So the first book I wrote with David Cohen in 2010 was a book called Do More Faster, Lessons from Techstars to Accelerate Your Startup. And from that then came this passion I've had for trying to do a longer form writing around the kinds of things I'm doing and have been involved in entrepreneurially. I've always been a very active blogger, written continually about entrepreneurship and technology and startups. But I started to have this longer view of trying to put together a body of work that would be valuable for the next 20 years. So things that had some duration, that weren't yet another book by a consultant saying, here's how you do some bullshit, just follow my 4 steps and life will be happy, but trying to create real substance from my own experience. The second book that I wrote was called Venture Deals, Be Smarter Than Your Lawyer and Venture Capitalist. And that book was really about doing early stage investments and how to raise an early stage financing. So those really gave me the sense of, okay, there's some value here in terms of putting this together. They were both very popular books amongst entrepreneur and startup communities around the US and internationally. And about a year ago, I decided to write a series of 4 books, of which Startup Life is the second. So the first book in this series was called Startup Communities, Building an Entrepreneurial Ecosystem in Your City. How many people here either have it or have read it? If you have it, you get to count. Raise your hands higher. Okay, so I've got some market saturation problems here. So there's a little card on your chair about that book. And that book really talks about Boulder as the basis for how to think about creating a startup community anywhere in the world. So I have this deeply held belief that you can start a company anywhere, you can start a startup community anywhere, and in fact every city needs a startup community at its core because it's an important part of what happens in a city. That book, Startup Community, has been out since September. The Boulder thesis is something that is being talked about all over the world. The examples in the book, most of which come from Boulder, a few from Denver, and a few from elsewhere, really form this hopefully cohesive view of what you have to do to create a startup community anywhere. And I'll give you the Boulder thesis very quickly as I shift into Startup Life, which is the second book in the series, but I want to give those of you that are interested in the startup community here a sense of what the 4 principles are. The first is that the leaders have to be entrepreneurs. And this is something that challenges a lot of the status quo, because a lot of the status quo is that government or university or even big businesses that are sort of the anchor points of the community are the things that drive all of the business activity. In fact, I said, no, if you want to have a successful startup community, the leaders have to be entrepreneurs. And Boulder is a phenomenal example of that dynamic writ large. The second is that you have to take a very long-term view. You have to take a 20-plus year view to it. It's not something that happens overnight. And in fact, everybody in the room that's involved either as an entrepreneur or partner with an entrepreneur, you know that you don't create a company and in 2 years have something worth $1 billion. I mean, that happens every now and then. But really, it's a long journey. It's 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, sometimes 20 years. And the startup community journey is the same. But if you really want to create something vibrant and sustainable, it takes a long time. The third is that you have to be inclusive of anyone who wants to engage in the startup community in any way. And I really emphasize inclusive. It's this notion of everything is additive. It's not a zero-sum game where there are winners and losers. Sure, there's competition for people and resources, and sometimes people rub each other the wrong way, but there's so much opportunity to expand the activity around startups that the notion that you can't be fully inclusive is a mistake. So you have to be inclusive. And then you have to have activities and events that engage the entire entrepreneurial stack on a continual basis. And I feel like whenever I say that to a room like this, I'm preaching to the converted. I mean, that's the essence of what this whole place is. And that's the essence of a lot of the activity that's happening in Boulder right now, not just around entrepreneurship and accelerators and co-working, but also sort of the meme throughout the community broadly, which is that if you want to do something, you just show up and you participate. And if you want to start something, just start it. So that was the first book in the series. The second book is this one, Startup Life. On sale in the back of the room. I'd be a good book salesman if I didn't say that, but I'll tell you why you want to buy it in a little bit. But I want to start with a story, and I'll start with the story that's basically the preface to the book. This is the story that we start the book with. But I'll tell it rather than reading it to you, I'll tell you the story version of it. It's 2000. How many people were working in a startup or around a startup in 2000? How many people were not alive in 2000? So in 2000, I was an investor. I was already a venture capitalist. I was an investor in a bunch of companies. I was traveling constantly, trying to deal with what was starting to be the meltdown that was the beginning of the peak after the internet bubble. It hadn't crashed yet, but it was starting to decline. So everything was pretty fucked up. Like, it was just a mess everywhere you turned. And every day you're struggling. I heard, nervous laughter, which is a recollection of that. We just went through this period of time where everything was going great. And now all of a sudden, you shifted from 60 miles an hour going forward to 60 miles an hour in reverse, and you didn't notice that the gears grinded at all. And so I'm meeting my wife Amy in Boston. She had been there for something, or maybe she flew there to meet me, and I had been on the East Coast. And we're going to spend the weekend with some friends in Rhode Island. So we drove from Boston to Rhode Island. Now, when I say drove, a black town car picked me up. I came out of she was already in the car, so she must have been picked up from the airport. I was already on my cell phone. At that time, it was probably one of those StarTAC things. I got in the car. I kind of waved at her as I was talking on my phone, whatever I was doing. She very patiently watched me do that because she was used to that. We then drove 90 minutes to Newport. Beautiful afternoon. I remember the day, it was sunny. It was a little crisp, but it was kind of beautiful late summer, early fall day. And at some point along the way, I finished my call. And when you're on the cell phone, you're actually yelling. You're talking like this into the cell phone. And when your wife, who hasn't seen you for a week, is sitting next to you, she's kind of like, okay, this is really fucking great. So, I hung up the phone and hey, how are you? It's good to see you. Hey, how are you? Like, we had a kind of a decent first moment. And then the phone rings again. So I hang on, I gotta answer the phone. We get to our friend's house. Now, this is before we have iPhones and Blackberries. And so I'm still lugging around like stacks of paper of stuff I have to read and deal with because it's been printed out and I'm just carrying it around. Now I have email as well, but it's kind of on top of this. There's just like endless grinding through of this stuff. It's Friday afternoon, we get to our friend's house, and I've got like my stack of paper, and I'm going through my stack of paper, and I'm scribbling notes. And my two friends are very polite, and Amy and the two of them go outside, and they have a drink, and they have a snack, and I'm still doing my thing. And then we go to dinner. Dinner's at about 6 o'clock. And, it's Friday night, we go out to dinner, we're having a drink, we're having appetizers, and my phone rings again. Of course, like a knucklehead, I answer my phone. Now, I'm polite enough at this point to know that when the phone rings at 6:30 at a restaurant, the right thing to do is, if you're going to answer the phone, you walk outside and talk on the phone rather than sit at the table or sit in the corner. So I answer the phone and I go outside and have my phone call. I'm sure it's another phone call with another company that's blowing up. That it's Friday night. They're going to blow up on Monday just as well as they're going to blow up on Friday night. So why I'm doing this, I don't know. I come back in time just as dessert is being served. And it's not such a good thing. And I kind of know I fucked up. And I know it's not such a good way to start the weekend. But I'm like, all right, I'll recover. I got 2 days to recover. We go back, and you sort of have that moment where you know that things are not working with your significant other. Like, just know it's not so great. We go back and we hang out at our friend's house. By this point, I'm done with my phone calls, but there's a chill. And we get into bed, and we're sort of laying there in bed, and I challenge anybody who's ever in the middle of this chill, not good chill moment with their significant other to say that they can't identify that moment when they lay down in bed at night. Like, it's really obvious when you're next to each other that you're in that zone. Never happened, right? And Amy just says very quietly, I'm done. And I say to her, yeah, this week was really rough. I'm really tired. I'm so glad it's the weekend. It's so awesome to see you. We get to spend the weekend together. It's going to be really great. She says, no. I'm done. I don't want to live this way anymore. You're not even a good roommate. That's a pretty harsh thing to say on a Friday night, but it was true. And, I could feel her on the cliff, and I said, well, time out. Like, I'm done means that you don't want to be in this relationship anymore. And she says, no, I love you. I really want to be with you, but I just don't want to live this way. And if this is the way we're going to live, no, I don't want this anymore. And so I have learned, and it's one of the things we talk about in the book, you never go to bed at that moment. Right? So, the worst thing in the world you can do is like roll over and I'm waiting for the fall on you. The worst thing in the world you can do is roll over and like leave it for the morning. So, can everybody hear me still? Okay. So we talk, and there's some tears, and we talk some more, and we kind of get back to a place where you feel like it's still cold, but it's thawing a little. And we kind of get to a place where it's like, all right, I'm not going over the cliff tonight. And I say, let's spend some time talking about this weekend. I symbolically gave her my phone at that point. I said, look, I don't need my phone anymore. You can have my phone all weekend. So I'm just here. We're just going to talk. We're just going to be together. We're going to work through, figure this stuff out. And she's like, okay. Okay. And we kind of get quiet. And at that moment, only at that moment can you do this if you're a guy. I nudged her and I said, so does that mean I'm not getting any tonight? And she laughed that sort of nervous laugh that I knew it was okay. Like it was going to be okay. I wasn't going to get any, but it was going to be okay. Right? She was still talking. So we spent the weekend literally just walking and talking. And I said to her at the beginning of the weekend, I said, look, this is 2000. This is 12 years ago. Almost 13 years, 12 and a half years. I said, look, give me some rules. I'm an engineer. My brain works like an engineer's brain. Just give me some rules. And her first reaction was, are you out of your mind? That's not romantic. That's not what I want. I don't want rules. I don't want you to have rules. And I said, look, work with me. Help me be successful here. Maybe it's romantic that I want you to give me some rules. And so we played around with that. And we came up with, she's like, all right, all right, I'll try. And we started to talk through some of the rules. And the rules were actually really interesting. Because I started to say, well, what are the things that you want that I'm not doing? And they all centered around communication. And the essence of this book is how to be effective at communicating with your significant other. And it's written by the two of us, not about my deficiencies or her deficiencies, but about our journey together to figure out how to communicate effectively in the context of this life that's overstimulated, that has incredible amounts of ups and downs, endless tension, lots of complexity, and lots of things that demand your attention at all kinds of inconvenient times. And when in fact, your significant other, regardless of gender, wants you to be the most important person in their life and vice versa. But one of the signals I was clearly sending to Amy over and over and over and over again was that any random person that called me on the phone was more important than her. That's simple. So we came up with a bunch of rules, and I'll give you a couple of examples of the kinds of things that we talk about and go deeper in the book. So one of them is something we call life dinner. It's one of my favorite ones. And there's some couples here. How many people here are couples? All right. So it's almost February 1st. Okay? I encourage you to have life dinner on February 1st. Here's how life dinner came about for Amy and I. She said to me, I need you to commit to me. This is part of our rules. This is probably by Sunday by now. She says, I want you to commit to me to have dinner with me once a month, just the two of us. And she said, not date night. We have plenty of that. We go out a lot. But just the two of us, once a month, dinner. And you commit to that every month. And I said, I don't know if I can commit to that. This is hard. Wine. Bad guy energy. And she says to me, all right, hang on. Use Outlook, right? This is back before I used Gmail. back in the old days. You use Outlook, right? And I'm like, yeah. And she says, it has a calendar built into it, right? I say, right. She's very good at leading the witness. She says, and in that calendar you can make entries, right? Yes. And you can make them repeat, right? And I said, yes. And she said, so how about making an entry for the first day of the month from 6 to 10 p.m. that says Amy Life Dinner, and have it repeat every month forever. Because when you die, you don't have to go to the repeating appointment anymore. And I said to her, okay, I can do that, but you got to let me fail a couple of times a year. Once or twice a year I have to, like I'm out of town or something. She's like, I'll give you 1 out of 12. And I said, 1 out of 12, not enough. I got to have more than 1 out of 12. So we negotiated. She said, all right, how about 12%? So we ended up with 1 out of 8. So about one and a half times a year, not quite, I get to reschedule Life Dinner, and I always try to reschedule it for another night. So like this Friday, we're actually having it on Saturday, but it's her fault because I'm in town in time for it, but she's not. Okay? But that's okay because I'm flexible. She can fail once. So Life Dinner, what it is it's not date night, right? It's literally the two of us go to dinner. We exchange gifts. It's always on the first of the month again, except for when we tweak it. We exchange gifts. The gifts can range. There's plenty of art and jewelry given. There's plenty of fun gifts like remote control fart machine. And I just found version 2, by the way, at Rocket Fizz. For those of you that want remote control fart machine version 2, they have a whole barrel of them. And she gave me a car once. So, you know, it can be big, it can be little, it can be romantic, it can be silly. It doesn't matter, right? It's just whatever we give. But it's part of the ritual of giving a gift, because another thing that was a problem was I was a shitty gift giver. Like, you know, it's, what's today? Oh, shit, it's your birthday yesterday. Damn it. Right? Like, I had that syndrome, and one of the ways to solve that syndrome is to make it away from these random dates that you don't remember, and instead make it this event that you go to. We then very clearly have 2 parts to the discussion on Life Dinner. The first part of the discussion is looking backwards the previous month. So we talk about what happened, how we were feeling, what went well, what didn't went well, what was bothering us, what stress we dealt with, what accomplishments we had. And then we talk about the next month going forward, what we're thinking about doing, what we're excited about, what we're working on, etc. It's not a performance report, but it's a syncing up time. And sometimes it's 3 minutes. Sometimes it's a very short, looking back, looking forward conversation. And sometimes it's 3 hours with the kind of tears that keep the waiters away, right? And the tension in the dinner, and just sort of working through stuff. We never leave dinner unhappy. But we have a lot of ups and downs in these dinners. But we know that there's a place each month, every 30 days, that if something's bothering us, we have a chance to bring it up and talk about it in a safe way, in a safe environment, where the other person's not too tired, not distracted, not running away, not defensive, etc. Like, the worst time in the world for her to confront me with something is when I walk through the door at 9:45 after, you know, having worked all day, or coming back from it. Like, that's the worst. Like, she can confront me with anything she wants. She's going to get no satisfaction. It's not going to work. But if she can hang on to that until the first of the month, and then we can have a really deep conversation about it, I'll put 100% of my energy into it. So that's one of a whole bunch of different things that we figured out as rules that have really caused us to be able to much more effectively navigate this life. Now let me tell you, so that's a story. Let me tell you why you want to buy this book. That story didn't work. So I'm just going to read you the chapter headings, because you'll get a sense of what we're not trying to do is tell you how to live your life. We're trying to tell you how, from our experience, we've created an arc. So, you know, like every book, it has an introduction. We spent some time with philosophy. We spent a lot of time talking about communication and the dynamics of communication. And this is not a men are from Mars, women are from Venus kind of communication. This is the actual dynamics of constant communication between 2 people that are incredibly busy, that have their own parallel existences that interact with each other, and all the stresses on that. We spent some time talking about what startup company life is like. It's amazing how isolated partners feel when we talk to the significant other, again, male or female, of the entrepreneurs that we have talked to, and how the significant other feels with a partner, we call them a partner in the book, feels kind of lost. Like, is this normal behavior? I mean, I see it with my partner and some of my partner's friends, but it just seems weird and wrong and strange and disconnected from reality. We spent some time talking about personalities and values. We then spent a lot of time on skills, tactics, and techniques. And then we get into some juicy stuff. So we talk about issues and conflicts. We talk about big issues like illness and relationship, failure and divorce. Then we have the money chapter where we talk about money, right, which is another fascinating thing. We don't just talk about money as in we don't have any. We talk about money through the whole arc of we don't have any, now we have some, now we have a bunch, now we have a whole bunch. Like all of those things impact relationships. Think about the number of people that you know that thought they were going to be happy, especially the entrepreneurs that were going to be happy when they just had, you know, a big success and a lot of money. And then on the other side of it, not only are they not happy, they don't even know how to relate to whatever it is that they've got and whatever they've been searching for. So we try to weave that in. We talk about children. We have a whole chapter on that. We don't have any children, so we're real authorities on this topic. So we got about a half dozen of our entrepreneurial friends who had children to write this chapter and talk about their issues. We talk about family. Then the best chapter, this is the reason you want to buy the book, is we have a chapter on sex and romance, which you can never get enough of as far as I'm concerned. And then we have a finishing chapter called Enough, which is not about sex and romance, but is really about this issue of what are you trying to get out of this experience as an entrepreneur and as an entrepreneurial partner? And what does enough mean? And what's motivating you in terms of the things that you're doing, not as an individual, but as a couple. So what we've tried to do, when we started writing this book, one of our discussions, I wouldn't say it was a positive or a negative attribute of the discussion, but one of our discussions was, do we end up having written yet another relationship book? And we actually started calling it Yard, which is yet another relationship book. So we don't want to create a Yard. Became something we're talking about. We also didn't want to preach. We didn't want another one of those books that we've all bought and we've all read, that you read through it and it says, here's how you do things, and if you just structure your life this way, nirvana will happen. And you read through the book, and like maybe you get one thing out of the book, but the half-life of nirvana is very short because it didn't really stick. We also didn't want it to be an autobiography or biography. We didn't want it to be our story and that was it. So we've got about 20 other entrepreneurs who have contributed substantive sections to it that we've woven throughout, many of whom are from the Boulder community, some who are not. And what we've tried to do is make it a very personal version of what this journey is like, while throughout it being very substantive about things you can do, both as an individual and with your partner, both aimed at the entrepreneur and the partner of the entrepreneur, or if you're both entrepreneurs, both of you, and be, I would say, gender reversible. It's not a book that's aimed at couples where the man is the entrepreneur and the woman is the partner, or where the woman is the entrepreneur or the man is the partner, or frankly the partners are men and women. They could be women and women or men and men or whatever. So we've tried to be very mixed in our integration of these thoughts so they're really from our perspective. Of the 4 books I've been involved in writing, I'm proudest of this one. It was the hardest to do, but it feels like the one that has the most substance to it. So from my own perspective, you can't ever say, my book is great. Well, you can't. My book is great. Actually, I can say Amy's book is great. But it was something that we really put a lot of ourselves into, so hopefully that shows through. So that was my 15 minutes. That was a programmer's 15 minutes. For those of you that are programmers who recognize my timekeeping. Let's do Q&A. Again, happy to talk about this or anything else. Go ahead.
So why do you think it's important to write this book? I mean, you have all these skills, all these different things. Why about relationships?
So I'm 47 years old. I married my high school girlfriend right out of college. It was good for 3 days. Unfortunately, it lasted for almost 3 years. Probably, unfortunately, more for her than for me. And we got divorced. We didn't have kids, so it was more like a breakup, post-college breakup, than it was anything else. But it was pretty profound. And I was, at the time, an entrepreneur. So I was working 100-something hours a week on my first company. All of the sort of behavioral dynamics that frankly played through my 30s. So this 2000, I was 35. I mean, I really didn't ever figure any of those things out in the context of relationship. In my second marriage with Amy, we got together shortly after I split up with my ex-wife. Amy and I spent a lot of time saying we're not going to repeat, or I spent a lot of time saying and probably thinking I'm not going to repeat that arc. The two of us have had an amazing relationship and have an amazing time together. But we got to this very deep place that was very bad. And we've, over the last dozen years, gotten to a very, very good place. So that was a very powerful driver for me. That's piece number one. Just how important it is as an entrepreneur to be satisfied in your whole life, not just in your work life. That was piece number one. Piece number two is I have a deeply held belief that we do not know when the lights go out, and when they go out, they go out. I hope it's 117 years from now. I'm probably unrealistically optimistic about that. So I never really understood this notion of deferring life. Like, people talk about work-life balance, and I never really totally understood the phrase, and I didn't really understand the idea intellectually, understand the idea of deferring. I'm going to retire, or I'm going to work really hard, make a bunch of money, and then. Like, none of those things ever really worked for me as a person, and it's not how I lived my life, and it's not how Amy and I have worked to live our relationship, which is very integrated. We have a lot of work stuff, a lot of life stuff, tangled up amongst themselves. But we also have very separate lives. She has things that she likes to do, I have things I like to do, and we're both trying to maximize our satisfaction on a continual basis rather than a deferred basis. So that was two. Three is, one of the things that I've experienced as I've been a peer to, a mentor to, and involved with many, many entrepreneurs, thousands of entrepreneurs over the last 30 or some odd years, is in addition to their own struggles with entrepreneurship, I've had plenty of my own struggles. And the struggles are not just functional ones, they're emotional ones. I've struggled with anxiety my whole adult life. I had, for those of you that know anything about clinical anxiety, I have something called obsessive compulsive disorder, which in my 20s was very severe. In my mid-20s, after I got divorced, I was feeling incredible anxiety around that. It lasted about 2 years. It had a lot of depression layered into it, so I spent a lot of time struggling through that. I was a very functional depressive. I was a CEO of a company, right? So I'd show up, I'd suit up each day, and I'd go to work, and I'd do my best, and I'd come home, and I'd sit in the bathtub for 2 hours, right? So like, I used up 100% of everything I had every day just to make it through the fucking day, and then I had nothing left. And I was very fortunate that I had a person in a partner in Amy who was very patient with that, who was very supportive of it, who helped me understand what was going on. But that's a third piece of it, which is this notion that we're complex beings. And this idea that entrepreneurs are like, we're just going to go take that hill and win. And everything's going to be great. And failure's okay, don't worry about it. No big deal, brush it off. And just bullshit. Like, it's just really complicated. And on top of it, you now layer this incredible intensity around the ups and downs of a startup. And that motivated me and motivated Amy to try to put it together in a cohesive form. That's what drove us to do.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So I was one of the people that was involved in getting you here today. And it's been about a month and a half process. And I didn't find out until today that you were speaking about startups and relationships. And when I found out, I was like, oh my fucking God.
Wrong one. I thought I was getting it for this other thing.
So I'm the community director for this building, and I'm the director of Scrib. So I'm not only involved in startups, but I'm involved in startups that are aimed at giving hand jobs to other startups to say, you're doing good, buddy. Yeah. Very immersed in the whole scene. And at the same time, I'm a single man. And so trying to understand how to translate, when meeting somebody, to say, I'm very into you, but at the same time, I'm going to work 75-hour weeks, and on the weekends, like, I'm going to half, be there, and to be passionate about what I'm working on, but be passionate, about the person I'm involved with. In trying to find that dichotomy and starting out with somebody Do you have any tips or
Yeah,
suggestions?
I have huge suggestions on it, and I think some of it comes from my own experience reflecting backwards, and some of it comes from sort of being in the moment continually with new relationships that are not necessarily romantic relationships or intimate relationships, right? As an entrepreneur who's working in these environments, you're constantly meeting new people, and you're relating to those new people in a certain way where in the moment, whatever that moment is, however long it lasts, if you're effective, they feel like they've got your full attention in that moment, okay? So in a business transaction, we're very adept at that. And the huge aha for me was that moment when Amy told me I'm not even a good roommate, right? We have a story in the book about we're living in Boston, so it was before we moved out here, and it was before this particular meltdown. And I can't remember which section this one is. It might be in the section about sex. It was a Friday night again. Always happens on a Friday night, right? And we just had sex, and we come home we had dinner together, and it was, we're young in our relationship, so I'm sure it lasted about 3 hours or something like that, and it was magnificent. And we're laying in bed getting ready for round 2, and my phone rings. Okay? So this is in the mid '90s, so it's before caller ID. I have no idea who's calling me. I have a cordless phone, so I pick up my cordless phone, I answer it. It's a client of ours from the West Coast, so it's 10 o'clock our time, 7 o'clock their time. So he's probably just like leaving the office, but I'm like well past having left the office. Number one, I answered the phone. That's dumb. Okay. Now, number 2, it's a client calling me at 7 o'clock on a Friday night. He can wait. And the right answer was, hey, his name was Jim. I still remember his name. Hey, Jim, can I call you back? If it's really urgent, I'll call you back tomorrow. If it's not urgent, can we do it Monday? Not only did I not do that, but I then spent 30 minutes on the phone helping him solve his problem. Right? So there was no round 2. But this was systemic behavior in the relationship. The systemic behavior, which played out over and over and over again, was I was unable to say, okay, it's time for me to be with you. I could do that I could be in a meeting, I could be attentive in a meeting, I could focus, I could make my commitments to be on time for something, I could make a deadline, but I couldn't be in the moment. Something else happened that became more important. In a new relationship, but also in an existing relationship, it doesn't get any different when you're into it 22 years. You have to have that moment. If Amy called me right now, I'd answer, because we have a rule that I always answer the phone whenever she calls. Okay, she has one of a phone ringtone. Her ringtone is unique on my phone.
What is it?
Yeah, that was
I was like, it was a layup for somebody to answer. Well, I'll play it for you. It's more fun to play. We have any guesses?
Spice
Thrift
Girls.
shop.
What?
Thrift shop.
Spice
Theme
Girls.
song for Darth Vader.
Your Imperial March.
Alright, take your bow, whoever that was. Did you know that or did you guess that?
I guessed that.
Well done. So this has been her ringtone for as long as you could put ringtones on iPhones. And she chose it. Right? This is not me choosing her ringtone, this was her choosing my ringtone. And she will occasionally say to me when I answer the phone, hey sweetie, she'll say, this is a dark boy. Yeah, they're like, I don't mind if you work when you're home, but I don't want you to just disappear. So now, if I want to go work on my computer, I ask permission. I don't ask permission in a subordinate way. I say, is it okay with you if I go work on my computer for a while? And 9 out of 10 times she says yes, no problem. But then she knows. Like, it's just that little bit of signal. Right? Another thing like that is she hated it. The phone would ring, and she doesn't like the phone, so she can just let the phone ring. She doesn't care. She doesn't want to talk to anyone else. In fact, I'm not even sure why she has a phone. Other than the phone. But my phone would ring constantly. When we were younger, now I hate the phone, so I figured out how to make my phone longer. But at the time, the phone would ring. And at some point, I remember, like, she was so mad at the phone, she's like, I hate this phone again. So we took all the phones out of the house. We got a single line that was her line. My line took it out of the house, except for my office. So the only place I have a phone is in my office. So I can't hear the phone ring elsewhere in my house. Now, the house that we live in today, my cell phone doesn't ring because I don't have service. That's a unique problem. But when I'm in a place where we're together and she doesn't want the phone to be on, I just turn it off. Right? So, you know, it's that same kind of thing. It's like figuring out those things that are the big red buttons that are causing it all. And they're almost all coming back to having these, it's not having these intricate rules. It's having the ability to talk about when I'm with you or when we're together, we're together.
A lot of people rely on religion to help them through that sort of stuff, and is there a spiritual component to the book? So let me separate religion and spiritual. And to do that, I have to give me 30 seconds to frame our own religious beliefs, because I think they're important, to frame my answer. So I grew up Jewish. I was agnostic through my mid-20s, to the point at which Amy said that I was being a wuss, and I became an atheist. She actually told me I was being a pussy, and she said very directly to me, she said, stop being a pussy. She said, do you believe in God? And I'm like, I don't think so. And she's like, do you believe in God? And what are you hedging against? So I'm culturally Jewish, and sort of everything around that is important to me, but I'm an atheist. She has no religion. She grew up without religion. We're both deeply spiritual. Okay, we care a lot about humans. We care a lot about our place on this planet. You know, we've been in Boulder since '95. I think we've absorbed plenty of the Boulder spiritual juju from it. And we care a lot about the dynamics. And we're also extremely open to anybody's belief system. So anybody can have whatever belief system they want. We have no judgment about it. So we're clear about ours. We're very spiritual. We have no judgment about it. I believe there's a lot of spiritual components woven through this book. So I had somebody who read an early version of it, just a part of an early version of it, who I'd given a talk to about startup communities, about the previous book. Came up to me after the story, and it was a woman who was very religious, very Catholic. And she says to me, you know, you have a very Catholic ethos. And I said to her, okay, I'm not even sure what that means. I take it as a compliment. She says, you know, a lot of the things you're talking about are sort of commonplace religious texts. And, you know, my reaction to that, I was very polite in the moment, my reaction to that was, they strike me as very normal human texts. Like, if you're trying to be a good person, these are things that, you know, it doesn't have to be claimed by anything. But I think that's woven through a lot of it, and hopefully it comes through in a very positive way to anybody. If I've scared you away, just leave. A couple more, last one. We'll do these last two.
Just to follow on to that, so do you consider your career as part of you?
So career is a really complicated word for an entrepreneur. It really is. I don't have a career. I have never really thought of what I have as a career. And I understand what you mean by it, so I'm saying that as a starting point because, and I'll answer the question. As a starting point, it's really hard if you don't understand what a career is or you don't relate to the notion of a career to think about what it is in terms of how it relates to you.
So work.
Work. My work is a very important part of who I am. And it's very important to what I think about, but it has to do with how I'm motivated. And this is another thing we talk about in the book. I think that's really important for partners to understand. You can take personality tests, they're helpful. You can do group counseling and therapy, or you can just try to understand yourself and your partner. In the case of Amy and I'll give a very specific example. One of the dimensions, it's an easy one to talk about, is the dimension of motivation. What motivates you? And at one end of the spectrum is extrinsic motivation. And that's what people are used to. That's, you did a great job, you got a gold star, you won a trophy, you came in first, you know, whatever, you're on a list of great things that people do. You walk down the street and you hear people talking about you, and that makes you, like, you know, the dopamine, yeah, good. At the other end is intrinsic. And intrinsic is that there's something internal that motivates you that has nothing to do with this external stuff. And for me, the intrinsic dimension is learning. Now, I'm not savant-like, where I'm all the way at the end of the intrinsic spectrum, but I'm pretty far down that spectrum. Like, you give me an award, I'll say thank you, I'll appreciate it, I'll be nice about it, I'll be polite. It doesn't mean that much to me. It doesn't motivate my behavior that much. If I get on a list of great whatevers, yeah, it's in the moment, it's kind of cool, but it's not the thing that motivates me to do the action. The thing that motivates me is the learning. For Amy, she's not, again, not all the way on the extrinsic spectrum, but she's much more on the extrinsic spectrum. So positive feedback, praise, all of this stuff motivates her. And there's a whole bunch of other dimensions, but this is one. For somebody like her that's motivated by it, like at that end, if you praise her too much, it becomes false. It devalues the praise. For me, it means nothing. It has no impact on me. But for her, if it's too much, it doesn't mean anything. But if it's withdrawn or if it's non-existent, it's very demoralizing, right? So just understanding that stuff matters. So in the context of work for me, my work is about learning. I'm doing this because I'm learning. It's hard to write a book because to write a book, you have to actually think about the thing that you're talking about and spend a lot of time working on not just what it means, but how to articulate it. And in that, you have to learn a lot. So in some ways, writing this was very powerful for the two of us because it reinforced a bunch of stuff, but it caused us to have to learn others. I'll give you a really fun example. We have another book that we're going to write together, which is called Startup Book. Surviving and Thriving Writing a Book with Your Significant Other. Okay? We sat down to start writing this book, and Amy says to me, how do you want to do it? I said, well, let's do it like the last one I did, which was, you take some chapters, I'll take some chapters, and you'll write some stuff, and I'll write some stuff, and then we'll swap. And she's like, I don't want to do it that way. I want to work on it together. And then the negotiation of how to work on it together entailed. And how many people here know what peer programming is? Bunch. Good. Okay, peer programming is when two people sit next to each other and you code together. This was as close to peer programming as you could get. Like, we were working on different parts of the book, but we were sitting next to each other writing together. Because she wanted to be writing together. Rather than and then, over time as the book took more shape, she spent time on it separate from me and vice versa. But that sort of learning was so powerful to me. And I was game to learn what it was like to work on a really significant project with her. Whereas I think she enjoyed that too, but she's pretty excited about having her name on a book that's in a bookstore. Right? That would be extrinsic. Okay, last one. And then I'm going to stick around. I'm going to sign books for people that buy them. Hopefully that'll be most of you. And then I can keep talking and answering stuff on all.
This clearly is going to benefit entrepreneurs in terms of their personal lives and relationships. Wondering what you think if lots of people will start to read this and really get your share, how might it affect what startups put out into the world?
It's a good meta question. I don't have any idea. It's a fun meta question to ponder. Like the startup communities was an example of that. Somebody says, what's your goal with startup communities? And I said, if a whole bunch of people get motivated to work harder at their startup communities, my sense is that's a good thing. Like it's hard to argue that that's not a good thing. And I would put the same thing here. It's hard for me to argue anything negative about entrepreneurs and their partners working harder at their relationships to have a better life in the context of the entrepreneurial art. That feels like a net positive no matter how you measure it. How much of an impact that's going to have, I don't know. Does it really change the arc of society? I mean, I have no clue and I have no idea how to measure it. So I'm more interested in, does it impact individual people? Did it make their lives better? And if it made their lives better, we actually write early in the book, if we make one relationship better, it was worthwhile for us in terms of the process. So I think that level of satisfaction with the goal is where we start. So again, I'm going to be in the back. I'm going to sign books for anybody that buys them. If you like the book, make a lot of noise about it. Blog, tweet, whatever. If you don't like the book, please don't tell anybody. Just bury it in the backyard or give it to somebody else or pretend like it never happened. But I'm easy to reach. I'm brad@feld.com. So if there's things that we didn't get to or other stuff to follow up on, or I can never be helpful in the context of whatever startups you're working on, just shout anytime. And thanks for listening. I would love feedback on this talk. Remember, intrinsic motivation, not extrinsic. So I'm trying to learn what I can do to make this talk better. I'm not looking for praise for this talk. Praise is fine. but also sort of, hey Brad, if you had talked less about this and more about this, or if you had done this instead of this, or gosh, could you have just done more of or less of? That's helpful to me, so please, if you have it in your head, send it to me. It'll be, you're the first, I'm breaking this in on you, so it'll be super helpful to me. Thanks for having me, and thanks for